Chapter 445. There have been a few times since then when I have woken up with a vague feeling of having had a rather unpleasant dream. No one else was beside me when I slept and woke up, so I can't say for sure if there is a connection. Do you have no recollection whatsoever of what you dreamt? None at all. Kishir nodded with a mild expression. He said that when Nathan Zuckerman woke him up, he did not sleep talk like this time. Since he couldn't remember, it was hard to say with certainty whether these events were related, but either had a compelling reason to think otherwise. Udrian. His train of thought abruptly halted at the voice that seemed to read his mind. His fingers twitched noticeably, but the shock wasn't as intense as it was the night before. So, that's the cause of your concerns? Kishir's eyes narrowed as he studied Yudhir's expression. Yudhir thought he would naturally ask for an explanation, but Kishir's question was about something entirely different. Do you know what was inside the box Nathan bought earlier? Cookies, or so I heard. Puzzled by the unexpected question, Yudhir watched as Kishir pulled a box wrapped in cloth from the corner of the table. Unfolding the cloth, he revealed what was inside. There are cookies, but that's not all. Kishir opened the box, and alongside with the carefully wrapped cookies, an old box was revealed. It was the same box used for learning the Gore language. If it's not meaningless gibberish, I felt you should know its true meaning. It felt familiar to Gore, so I reached out to Baron Kyold. If it had been the capital, Kishir could have used his own book, but they were in the west. Fortunately, Baron Kyold, who had recently established contact with them, was a scholar proficient in Gore and had the book Kishir was looking for. Yudhir recalled that Nathan Zuckerman had reported that he bought both things in that box to Kishir. He had assumed it was merely different types of cookies, but he was wrong. The truth lay here. Even without Yudhir saying anything, Kishir was already moving so swiftly ahead. And if I had said nothing, he would have kept everything he discovered buried in silence. Kishir began flipping through the book. He seemed to know exactly where to look, and Yudhir did not stop him. Instead, he thought about the name that had once been his. Udrian. That name was a gift he had received before becoming the commander of the cavalry in his past life. To be honest, until recently, he had nearly forgotten all about it. Had he not heard Kishir mention it in a dream, he might have continued to forget who had given him that name and how he had received it. I heard in the dream that it was made in Gore. However, he had not heard its meaning. Even looking back on his past memories, he couldn't distinctly recall what the name had meant. Not that he was particularly curious, given that it was a name he had abandoned and had no intention of reclaiming. If I hadn't heard it again last night, I could have buried it forever. He felt bitter, and then the faces of those who had mockingly accused him of intentionally changing his name to noble sounding to erase his past flooded his mind. Yudhir seized his reminiscence there. Normally, receiving a name was considered an honorable gift and a source of pride. People assumed that Emperor Kashtian had bestowed the name upon Yudhir, and Yudhir did nothing to correct that assumption. However, the man who had given him that name was right in front of him, flipping through a book. Could he, who had long carried the name without fully understanding its meaning, rediscover its essence now? Amidst a sensation as if someone was gently tickling his gut, Yudhir silently waited for Kishir to speak up. There is really no word that fits exactly, Kishir finally said. Is that so? If you think it as a single word, yes. Setting the book down where Yudhir could see, Kishir pointed to a specific section with a peculiar smile. In the Gore language, Ra serves as a connector between words, much like the word and. Assuming the Ra in Udrian has that function, and we look at the original forms of the surrounding characters, do you see? Above Kishir's fingertip, the word for beginning, Yud, was visible. Yud, which means beginning, and on the side, In, means end. When Ra connects them, beginning and end, muttering these unfamiliar words, Kishir chuckled softly. Literal translation would suggest so. However, considering the semantics of the two words and ancient grammar, it could translate differently. Do you understand what I'm getting at? ... Eternity. The beginning and the end, connected by the letter in between, could signify eternity. Even though Kishir continued to speak more elaborately afterward, nothing more registered in either's mind. Hadn't he said to cherish the name, as it contained good meaning? The memory of Kishir's dry voice, almost like a joke from a dream, suddenly resurfaced. In front of the meaning of his name that he had come to understand after such a long time, Yudhir kept silent for a moment before closing his eyes. A warmth he had never felt before, not even when cauterized with hot iron, pulsed through his head in sync with his heartbeat. He couldn't suppress the sensation. Commander? Yudhir interrupted Kishir's words. Why such a grave face? Did my conjecture miss the mark again? Do you remember in the Great Serene Forest you mentioned you had seen something connected to me? Kishir's expression, once tinged with levity, changed for a moment. Yudhir looked into his eyes and whispered softly. I never mentioned it, but I also saw something similar recently. When fighting against a southern merchant in the pitch-black darkness of a secret warehouse, a thread-like something appeared to guide him as he desperately searched for Kishir, whose location was unknown. Without any explanation, he knew that Kishir was at the other end of that thread, and indeed he was. And I believe that mysterious connection between you and me. His dissipating voice even sounded distant to him. Yudhir cleared his throat and finished what he was saying. Might be connected to that dream of yours. Otherwise, you couldn't possibly speak of things only I know about, even while you were asleep. ... He couldn't say everything, but this much would surely give Kishir something to think about. I hesitated because I was afraid the truth would be confirmed. Yudhir gave a faint smile, his face reflected in his red eyes. Nothing else in the world scares me. Only you, Commander, make me feel afraid. Swallowing the deep-seated emotions and indescribable memories within him, Yudhir laid bare his somber confession. Perhaps you are the only one who could make me this way. Before and even now. In the silence, a droplet of water trickled down the glass Kishir had been drinking from. The droplet slid slowly, then quickly down the cup filled with cold liquor, finally dropping from the handle onto the white lace tablecloth, leaving a small dark stain. Perhaps the fear Yudhir felt for Kishir Lahore began in much the same way. What was thought to be a small stain grew larger, eventually altering the original color so profoundly that it became impossible to hide. Yudhir waited quietly for a response. After unburdening himself to some extent, he felt like a condemned man awaiting the executioner's blade. Just as a new droplet began to form on the outside of the glass, a low voice broke the silence. May I come to you? Across a single table, their eyes met. The moment Yudhir gave a slight nod, Kishir rose from his seat. The chair toppled back and rolled on the floor, but no one paid it any mind. Approaching, he pulled Udir into an embrace without a word. A strong scent wafting through the air, heavy enough to make one feel dizzy. "Come on!" Before the word could escape his lips, deeply overlapping mouth silenced him. After a long time, the man who had imprisoned Udir between the chair and his embrace finally pulled back, whispering softly through their mingled breaths. "There is only one person who could make me this way too." At the sound of his deep, husky voice, goosebumps rose on Udir's skin. "And that person is right here in front of me." Strangely, it was then that he felt he truly understood Kana's words. The deeper fear dug its claws in, the more it blinded one from seeing the path ahead. He couldn't understand why he hadn't noticed that. When you peeled back a layer, the other person was not so different from himself. Every aspect of Kishir Lahore had been directed toward him with such blind faith from the very beginning. What he had hesitated to say, avoided so endlessly as if it were a lie, now surged up as emotions he had suppressed for so long erupted into a fiery whirlpool.